Good morning. Welcome to a BWRC breakfast talk. Thank you all for coming. Here we have an interesting program today. One of the things that makes the Brooklyn waterfront so vital is these cultural institutions that we have, and they come in all different flavors, but we have privilege to have three with us today, kind of cultural entrepreneurs, if you will. That is, people who have had a vision and it is concerned with the water and the waterfront and the history of the waterfront and the place of Brooklyn in the work of the city and in the history of the city. And these people have made all of that come alive. And it's made our job at the Brooklyn Waterfront Research Center much more interesting to have these resources available and to have these three valuable people who have been very generous as we have developed. So today we have with us Andrew Gustafson, who has created Turnstile Tours, a touring company, and which focuses mainly, although not exclusively, on tours of the Brooklyn waterfront and its various institutions. We have our Carlina Salguero, who has, through her work on PortSide NewYork, most associated with the Mary Whalen, has offered numerous educational programs and as well as environmental programs, as well as in moments of crisis for the community, has also helped, especially most specifically the Red Hook community where she is located. And finally, we'll hear from David Sharps, whose Waterfront Museum barge is a stable, again, along the waterfront, and it is a magnificent place and to go. And it is where David has raised his family, as well as offering all kinds of cultural and educational events to Brooklynites and tourists and people from the world over. So it's my pleasure to welcome all three of these cultural entrepreneurs to the Brooklyn Waterfront Research Center today, however virtual we are. And we'll begin today with hearing from Andrew, who's going to take in each case, people going to COVID, because we're all virtual and we can't deny the existence of COVID. So today we're going to ask each person to speak first about how COVID affected what their mission is and has been, how COVID affected that mission or didn't, and what changes, if they had to make any, will they keep as we go forward in what I call the after times, life after COVID. And I know there's some hope for us all as these vaccines make their way around. So as we listen, there you will see both a chat function at the bottom of your screen and a Q&A function. The Q&A for questions for the guests, and we'll have the question and answer session after each has presented. And you can direct it to one particular person, or you can direct it to the group as you wish. And the chat function is mainly to see who's around. You can't turn your head as if we were at City Tech and see somebody in a row behind you and give a wave. So we'll give a virtual wave through our chat. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Andrew and give him the stage, or in this case, the screen.
Thank you so much, Richard, and thank you everybody for joining us. I see a lot of familiar names on, so welcome. It's been really great to connect with so many people and so many new people as well through the pandemic, including people beyond our normal constituency here in New York City. So I just wanted to welcome everyone. Yeah, for those of you who aren't familiar with us, Turnstile Tours. We work in partnership with a lot of different organizations. And so what I want to talk about this morning is kind of the work that we normally do in our mission. And as Richard said, we're all going to talk about how things have changed and, what are those changes that we're going to carry on into the future. So I'm going to pull up some slides here. Bear with me for one moment. Okay, so a little bit about our mission. So we're what's called a benefit corporation. So we're a social enterprise. And our mission is to advance public knowledge about the meaning of place, foster connections and understanding between people of diverse backgrounds, and inspire and reflect a culture of community participation through providing well-researched, inclusive, and engaging educational experiences and resources to people of all ages and abilities. And so we do that principally through guided tours. So here is a little bit of what we do and where we work. As Richard mentioned, a lot of our work does focus on the waterfront, and we do that principally at two sites. We have been the tour operator for public tours at the Brooklyn Navy Yard since 2008. And we've been working at the Brooklyn Army Terminal since 2012. But we also work in partnership with the Prospect Park Alliance. We work with the city's public market system, including at the Essex Market. We work with an organization called the Street Vendor Project to do tours about the street food industry. And then we also work on, custom itineraries and custom programs. And, during the pandemic, we've shifted a lot over into the virtual space as well that I'll talk about. So some of the themes that we specialize in, is really providing historical perspective, but always kind of grounding it in the present day. We really try and focus all of our programs around those past-present connections. We do share a lot about the working waterfront, not just people working directly sort of in the water, but also all of the other, industrial organizations and companies that are really concentrated along the waterfront in Brooklyn. We do a lot of programs about architecture and infrastructure, and then how the city's kind of food system works. So our sort of unofficial mission is that we share with people, how the city works. And that includes both, kind of taking people behind the scenes, sort of the back office of the city and its basic infrastructure, but also, the organizations and companies that are providing jobs and doing things like workforce development is what we really focus on. So these are, like I mentioned before, some of our program partnerships. So all of the in-person tour programs that we do are built around partnerships with nonprofits, and our mission is really to help do capacity building, provide these institutions with public programming that they might not be able to do otherwise. It might not be the focus of their organization. And so we can help provide resources to help them reach the public in new and different ways that they might not be able to otherwise. So just some images of our tours, again, in the before times. You can see no one is wearing a mask. So here we are at Dry Dock 1 at the Brooklyn Navy Yard. And so as we transition into talking about how things have changed, this has obviously been the biggest change. It's hard to gather together, groups of people to go on guided tours. We have developed protocols so that we can do it safely on a limited basis, and we've been doing that exclusively on our Prospect Park tours thus far. The other thing is that because the Brooklyn Army Terminal and the Brooklyn Navy Yard are both city-owned properties, they've really been mobilized in the fight against COVID, including setting up testing centers, vaccination centers, and then also doing manufacturing of personal protective equipment. So they've had a lot of fish to fry. And we've really been proud to be able to share a lot of that work. And proud of so many of our wonderful colleagues at those institutions, but obviously they've had other priorities other than doing public tours, which is completely understandable, and we've tried to support them in any way that we can. So, guided tours haven't been part of what we've been doing so much over the past year. Here we can see the Brooklyn Army Terminal. So we've transitioned into virtual programs, and this is something we did pretty quickly. We started them on March 19th. We gave our last guided tour on March 11th. And so within 8 days, we kind of stood up a virtual tour program, and we decided, let's do a virtual program every single day. And so we did that for the first 100 days of the pandemic. And we really got a tremendous outpouring of support. And not only from customers who wanted to watch and participate, but also from a lot of institutions, some of which we'd sort of had interactions with in the past, but never a formal partnership. And so it was really great to be able to, again, provide capacity building for a lot of institutions in the early days of the pandemic when they hadn't yet kind of stood up any sort of virtual programming. And so these are some of the, just a handful of the waterfront related institutions that we've had the pleasure to work with, including, you can see on here, the Waterfront Museum. But I also I saw Mary has joined us, so I want to mention the Lilac Preservation Project, and we've done several programs with the South Street Seaport Museum, and as well as the Gowanus Dredgers and many others. So it's been great to be able to make these new connections through the virtual space, not only with new institutions, but also being able to reach people all around the world. And so we've had people not only sign in for 1 or 2 programs, but people join we've set up a membership program. So that's part of what's kind of sustaining us, is a monthly subscription program that we set up. So just wanted to give a few highlights of some of the programs that we've done. So here's David, who you're going to get to see in just a couple of minutes. I also really wanted to mention our staff. So at Turnstile, at the beginning of the pandemic, we had 8 staff. And today, a year later, we have 8 staff. So we've been able to retain everybody. And that's been possible really through the tremendous support that we've gotten, but also, every one of our team members has done a wonderful job really making what was for many people a difficult transition from in-person programming to the virtual space. And I wanted to give a special shout out for our waterfront related programs to Stefan Dreisbach-Williams, who also works at the Waterfront Museum, but he's been really instrumental in helping build these partnerships and create this waterfront themed programming. So it's really added so much. And probably about, I don't know, of the 200 programs we've done, probably at least 40 or 50 of them have been related to the waterfront. Now, when we were creating the virtual programs, we didn't want to just create a sort of, being in a slideshow, sort of like now, giving a lecture, but see what we could do to really give people what they were asking for, which was the opportunity to kind of virtually visit a place for real, and have interactivity, be able to ask questions and really engage with us and our guests. And so we've tried to, we're still working on ways that we can do that better, but here we are. We gave a live virtual tour of the Brooklyn Army Terminal during Open House New York. That was really fun. And then we've been doing a series of tours from the water. We did a pair on the NYC ferry. We did one of the Astoria route and another one of the South Brooklyn route. And if you want to join us tomorrow at 2 o'clock, we're going to do one along the Hudson River and around the Statue of Liberty with our friends at Classic Harbor Line. So that'll be me and Stefan. I'll be on the boat and Stefan will be narrating from home. Again, with Open House New York, we also had the opportunity to create some self-guided tours. So we created a map that you can see here of the Astoria route. And you can find those on our website and on the Open House New York website. And then, this was one of the really amazing programs that we got to do with our friends at the Navy League New York Council, was to convene a number of people who participated in the boat lift on 9/11, evacuating people out of Lower Manhattan. So these are a number of people, both civilian and uniformed staff from the U.S. Coast Guard that participated in that, but we also had people from the civilian mariner side. It was really amazing. again, to convene these people and get these stories, but also all the people just in the chat who kind of came out and shared their stories as well. So that's what we found, is that just like on our regular tours, the program draws people out that then generates, more programming and more ideas. And we've had a number of kind of just viewers who have then gone on to become guests on our programs as well. Then we also have what we call Turnstile Studio, which is our consulting practice. That's another thing that's really helped sustain us through the pandemic, is that we do consulting, working behind the scenes with different museums and cultural institutions, working on training, accessibility, writing interpretive plans, helping them develop programs and partnerships. And so that's something that's always been sort of secondary to our business, but this year it's really come front and center and been very important for sustaining us, because it's work that we can do from anywhere. Yeah, so before, and here's our information. If you want to get in touch with us, feel free. And then the last minute or two that I have left, I just wanted to address Richard's last question, which is how we're going to kind of carry these things through in the future. And I think a lot of this will stay with us. We really crave that in-person engagement and doing, programs in real life and giving guided tours. But we understand that, we don't know when we're going to be able to do that at the same scale that we were doing before the pandemic. But we've also seen the incredible value of being able to connect with people in the virtual space. And so we're definitely going to continue that even after we resume in-person tours. It's been very valuable to reach new customers, but also we now have, 200 videos that are great for, driving traffic to our website, telling people about who we are and what we do. And it's also a great training resource for our staff, both our current staff as well as people that we might take on in the future. So we definitely want to continue doing the virtual programs. And we hope that we can also grow many of the virtual partnerships that we've built into in-person programming in the future as well. So we've really, kind of, opened up the Rolodex, so to speak, during the pandemic. And a lot of people have been really, really receptive and really supportive of us. And we hope we can return the favor and continue working with them in the future. But yeah, thanks so much. So I'll pass it back to Richard and look forward to talking more and hearing from our other panelists and answering your questions.
Thank you so much, Andrew. It's what you have done is quite extraordinary, and the fact that you started Turnstile Tours was an entrepreneurial effort and a creative effort to start with, and then you used those skills to just adapt to this new and awful environment we are in. And I'm sure when we, as you go back to things, it will be great to see all of this in person. But I'm just thinking, as a teacher, these videos are, what a library, what a resource, what a it's, I don't know, we at my college, we haven't had a place for a Brooklyn waterfront course. We did have a National Endowment for the Humanities grant where we had people from other places come in, but these videos and the like that you have is really a wonderful resource. So thanks.
Yeah.
From all New Yorkers for making them.
Oh, thank you. And I'll just add too that it's also been great for us to be able to connect with students, all across the country. It's expensive and it's an ordeal to come to New York City and do a tour in person. And now, it's not the same experience, but we can at least share some of our knowledge virtually. And so we've been doing a lot of private groups as well. Yeah, so anyone can check out our videos on our website, or you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. Yeah, but thank you.
Okay, and thank you, Andrew. And now we move to Carlina Salguero, who is going to talk about her unique and valuable enterprise, PortSide New York, and the good ship Mary Whalen. So, Carlina.
Thank you, Richard. Thank you, BWRC, and everyone who's here today. I'm going to try and do my screen share here. And there we go. So, I am the founder and executive director of PortSide. I founded PortSide actually to make change. So we are a forward-looking nonprofit to try and have New York City's the evolution of the waterfront, the revitalization of it to become more maritime oriented. Maritime in every way, the movement of freight, people on ferries, using the harbor for education, for cultural inspiration, whether that's on a historic ship or not. So my goal was to create a place called PortSide New York, of which the Mary Whalen, the retired coastal oil tanker in this photo, would be just a part. The story has been rather complicated, so as you will find out. So there is the Mary Whalen in her current location in Atlantic Basin, that rectangle of water with Lower Manhattan in the background. So I'm just going to fly through a bunch of slides about the former times, or whatever we're calling them, highlighting some of our programming, bringing visiting vessels. We've been a visiting vessel ourselves. Culture.
Excuse me, Carlene, the screen is not sharing right now.
Okay, well, it says I am screen sharing. You don't see the screen?
Correct.
I see the screen.
I see it as well.
Okay, what's the consensus?
I think we
okay,
can.
it seems everyone does except me. So go right ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry, Richard. Okay, so one of the features of PortSide programs, and this is part of our making change, is we tend to do harbor first. So the opera here, first performance in a Port Authority maritime terminal, backstory complicated. We are the organization that broke open Atlantic Basin to make it a public access site that it is now with programming. Movies, this actually shout out to the Lilac, Mary Hafstad is here. This is our exhibit about the mariners' response to 9/11, installed there because we didn't have building space. From the very beginning, our programs have been the buzzwords that are used now, manifesting been inclusive and equity. As the founder, I felt that really maritime history was presented as the activities of white men. And I knew not only was that not inclusive, it wasn't correct. So we have deliberately sought out stories that are different. So for example, Red Hook is essentially the Plymouth Rock of Puerto Ricans in New York City. They arrived here first on ships before people came in planes, and before the Puerto Ricans had migrated uptown and founded El Barrio. We have mostly in the digital space. We were digital before the pandemic because of our challenges getting a physical home that was accessible to the public. We have an African-American Maritime Heritage Program. There's a web page you can go look for. And we have a virtual maritime museum also launched before the pandemic. We're lucky in Red Hook in that Red Hook had really every form just about of maritime activity in New York City. So within our 1 square mile peninsula, we can tell New York City's maritime story in microcosm. We do education programs on and off the boat. We inspired the first elementary school in Brooklyn to become a maritime one in our own neighborhood. We work with high school students, career technical education, also job training with adults. We have a partnership with the labor union. In former times, the deck was open most of every day for tanker time, and then in the evenings for the second Sundays of the month, tanker time in the warmer months. We also are involved after Hurricane Sandy. It was personally, I have to say, deeply distressing to me to see the difference between how mariners in this harbor prepared, whether they were nonprofit or for-profit companies, for the storm, and how people ashore in our maritime peninsula didn't prepare. There was just a real difference in the two worlds. And so I made the decision that we would come off the boat and come ashore to help Red Hook setting up a Sandy 8 station, but then also really enter the resiliency dialogue to try and help non-maritime people grapple with this issue of flooding. And it really changed our programming. That was one of our first big program pivots. We've had many real estate pivots. to acknowledge that the blue space that we were trying to get New Yorkers to embrace as an asset is also highly destructive. So we had a lot of very impactful work, White House Award, commendations from the New York State Senate, et cetera, et cetera. We have a fantastic ship cat, world famous. Now, in terms of pivoting, the premise kind of your program is that everything was kind of sort of fine and dandy and normal, and then there's this crisis. But PortSide has really been facing a real estate crisis for it's now 15 years. So this is a postcard that a colleague sent to me. She's an important journalist up in Canada. And I kept this pinned up for the longest time, just this kind of crazy difficulty that we are always going through. A planner here in Red Hook said about 2 years ago that if you were in Europe, the government would give you millions of dollars to do this. Whereas PortSide has been fighting for now it's 15 years to get space. The longest fight to get building space in this location that's less than 7,000 square feet. And the New York City EDC, mentioned in the prior presentation, manages over 64 million square feet for the city. And we can't even get 7 out of them, even though they promised it. So it's really been a challenge. And this was the original offer: space for the Mary Whale and yet more, 600 feet of pier, half of the pier at this location, building space and use of a large parking lot. So they didn't give us that, and we were stuck in the container port. We finally get out in 2015. This is an example of the kind of space we would have had, but we were reduced to this kind of space actually for programming inside the ship. So the virus hits, and so what happens to us is it's a blend actually. So something I've been working on for 14 years, getting a vintage engine to restore the Mary Whalen's engine, is we'd contacted this power plant first in 2014, but when does it become available? During the pandemic. Let me tell you, it was that complicated trying to extract that, because as the pandemic rolls across the land, things become complicated. You know, the insurance backs out, the trucker is stuck far across the country because the trucking economy's collapsed, the governor of Missouri shuts the borders, etc. And this is an ongoing project for months. I start live streaming these sunsets because it occurs to me as I see New Yorkers freaking out on social media about going into lockdown, that what can we offer? We have a splendid view. So that's me up on top of the wheelhouse, and I start live streaming these sunsets, really not knowing if anybody would want them and what would they be. And they evolve with me providing some narration about the harbor, but they're also largely sort of 20 to 30 minutes of Zen every day. Very popular, 200 to 400 views a night. And they develop a whole new community for us. Really few people watching them live, most people later, as far away as Istanbul, Sarajevo, Hawaii, California. Anyway, so PortSide, we have a hyper-local relationship to Red Hook, though we also are programming for people citywide. And I was on many, many Zoom meetings as the community plans what to do for programming this summer, with nonprofits going to be closed because they're too small to have socially distanced space, because they're going to be defunded. And this is a photo of public housing in Red Hook, where 90% of the trees have been cut down. It's been turned into a maze of fences because of a Sandy recovery resiliency project. All their playgrounds gone, all their sprinklers, and everyone's like, where are the kids going to go? Where are the seniors going to go? And this is part of the incentive for me to do something pretty radical, which is to PortSide expands into the space. This is part of the parking lot that had been promised to us years before, but we hadn't gotten. And I don't ask for permits. I do this. Our councilman, Carlos Menchaca, says he'll back me up if the powers that be come after us. But I decide to respond to community need, and I feel my throat choking up now. I find people crying, hanging along the chain link fence, mothers with 3-year-olds picnicking on asphalt. People are desperate for outdoor space where it's not already too crowded. So this is much later in the summer as people are getting more comfortable. But we make this teeny weeny mini park, totally PortSide. It's donated, scavenged, we build it, it comes out of the garbage. We spend only $1,000. And then the Governor's Island Ferry moves the Brooklyn ferry operations from Brooklyn Bridge Park to Red Hook. And they bring 33,000 people through here through the summer, plus the thousands more that we attract. So this is a significant shift. Oh, and the pier has become locked due to COVID. So we suddenly are back to being inaccessible. We have a visible ship, but an inaccessible ship. And then this asphalt that we're programming with. And we start having music. And what triggers this is the opera director from our 2007 opera gets in touch to ask if we're willing to program with the Santa Fe Opera. They will hire local people to perform an opera about the life of Fannie Lou Hamer, Black civil rights activist. And there's no water story in that. There's no maritime story. We call our programming water stories. And I spend a week thinking about this, and musicians are getting in touch to ask if they can play either on the boat or in the parking lot. And I realize people are desperate for music, and I'm not a musical person myself. And I decide that if PortSide could pivot and make a Sandy Aid Center, the thing to pivot and narrow one way to do this is all the performance venues, whether it's a concert hall or a bar, are closed, and people need music and the performing arts. So I say yes. I say yes to the Santa Fe Opera, which doesn't occur until October. And then I say yes to all these musicians. And we basically DJ, avant-garde edgy stuff, brackish Brooklyn, shape notes singing, all sorts of things. And I was really moved when many people said to me, this is the first time I've heard live music since March. I'm choking up now. They often choke up. And I come to understand the power of music. For apologies to all musicians out there, but I'm not. And I really learned a lot with this summer. So the opera does trigger a big shipwork project because unfortunately the director wants the singer standing at the base of the one area of the ship we had not really restored yet. So we do that project. Here's a shot from the Santa Fe Opera. This is a wonderful local illustrator, Michael Arthur, who illustrates live performance or Halloween event. And voila, we do in fact get the engine. And then two kind of threads of the pandemic story come together. Our sunset viewing community has become very attached to us. And our largest donor is someone in Virginia who's never been to us. It's a way of passing the word. And our intern, Avery Steib, graduating from the Harbor School himself, raises over $3,000. We raised $13,000 to pay, not for the engine, they give us that, but to lift the crane, to lift it and trucking it here, and the engineer consultant. But all of this wonderful stuff that we do, plus more that I haven't mentioned due to time constraints, the city budget cut, our funding is cut 50%. Unfortunately, the Department of Cultural Affairs don't tell us that they're not going to fund us at all till the middle of December. So that's a panic. We're told, and this is something that affects the insurance situation, PortSide as well as the next speaker, we're having a very hard time getting marine insurance. I'm first told it will increase 100% if we can get it all. We've been unable to. We're going on month-to-month extensions. And on top of that, the New York City Economic Development Corporation, the EDC here, wants us to double our coverage, 100% more, which is like more money. This is really a jam. So we need some help. Anyone got any suggestions? An insurance underwriter CEO, let me know. I just want to segue to the change making I cited at the beginning. I would say that New York City waterfront bureaucracies manifest all of those conditions on this slide, but they're also shared by the New York City bureaucracy in general. And so thinking it's election year, I want everyone to really think about how government works, how we as a city are going to recover from the pandemic, not just PortSide or Turnstile Tours or the Waterfront Museum boards, and really think about what's working and what's not. If you'd like to help us, we'd be thrilled. Screenshot this, please. We could use pro bono help in design, development, always in ship work or joining our board. I really want to encourage people to vote and pay attention to the public process. Incredible amount of political change coming this year. And here's how to get in touch with us. And as to what will carry on in the future, I actually think though PortSide didn't pivot fully virtually. We actually had a huge analog summer. And since we were having that, I thought I will save the virtual for the winter, which we're going to be doing more now. The virtual programming actually means, as Andrew said, you can get people from very far away here, both the visitor and the speaker, for free. You can patch in slides and data and videos in a kind of way. It offers something. I think that's really worth continuing. As to the use of the outdoor space, I really don't know. It was promised to us before. The pier is still officially locked, so our ship is inaccessible. If you'd like to support us, we really think this EDC should be granting us use of outdoor space and the building space. In the absence of that and with a locked pier, I really just don't know. And kind of there we are. And thanks for listening.
Okay, Carlina, thank you so much for that presentation. And you are caught between a water in a hard place, and not a rock in a hard place, but or some riffraff in a hard place.
Right. What I want to say kind of in conclusion is I feel like PortSide's story is just, it's actually representative of the problems on the waterfront. So in our particular case, I'm elevating this, I'm making this visible for the first time in a panel like this, but there's a lot of information exchanged around the harbor amongst nonprofits. It is not it's overly complicated in the city, and it constrains basically everybody's operations in every way. And also, because of my prior reporting time, I have the confidence of a lot of senior maritime business people, and they actually have the same observations and complaints, which is why I moved my presentation into this focus on how the city's run and what we should be changing, because we are actually constraining maritime activity, whether it's nonprofit or for-profit in this town.
Okay, thank you very much. And we'll address issues if people have questions. At the end of all the presentations, we might be able to get even further discussion going on this. And now I'd like to present David Sharps, again, the founder, creator of the Waterfront Museum, the Barge Museum. I don't know. One time if you don't mind, David, I'll just tell this story of Thomas Hanley. One time I took a group of college professors from various places in the United States. They came to Brooklyn to learn about the Brooklyn waterfront. And one of the things that we did was to bring these people on board the Waterfront Museum so that they could watch a version, or they could watch On the Waterfront, the famous Marlon Brando movie. And David had a connection, if any of you remember the film, with the young boy in that movie. And the actor, that young boy, his name was Thomas Hanley. No relation to me, but David thought that was too good a coincidence to pass up. And so he actually offered, Thomas Hanley had been a longshoreman. He never became an actor other than that first movie. He was a retired longshoreman, and David got him on the phone for that. And we asked him all kinds of great questions. And it was a very interesting evening with a namesake who not related, the good Thomas Hanley, the little boy who kills all those pigeons in Marlon Brando's On the Waterfront. So now let me introduce and give the screen over to David. And thanks again for participating, David.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you for having me be a part of your program. I'm going to try to share my screen. Hopefully this will work. Can you tell me what happened? It says I'm sharing my screen. Can people? I can't see it myself.
It's sharing now.
Well, this
Okay.
time
You'll
I
just need
see
to
it
do
at
a
least,
present
David.
mode.
Okay, that was my bad. So, all right. So ahoy, everybody. Welcome. I got my beginnings. I left the mountains of West Virginia and joined the cruise ships as an entertainer, working for as a company we created called Serious Foolishness with a friend of mine, Karen Leslie, and we traveled the Aegean and the Mediterranean and Caribbean. That gave me the courage, I think, after a short stop in Paris, to buy a old wooden derelict barge that was sunken in Edgewater and had 300 tons of mud in the bottom of it. And after 4 years, we were able to get it afloat and get it presentable enough to take to the wonderful waterfront town of Hoboken. I thought Hoboken was going to be our home port forever. It was a wonderful location, but as things worked out, we had to leave there. We went to Jersey City, South Street Seaport, Piermont. Every place we went loved to have us, but it just didn't seem to work out, didn't want to allow us to live aboard the boat. And as it turned out, I met through Pete Seeger on a meeting at South Street Seaport aboard the Waiver Tree, and introduced by Michael Mann, I found Greg O'Connell, the O'Connell organization, and came to Red Hook in 1994. Our pier collapsed. The photo you see here is the creation of another pier at the end of Pier 44. Thanks to Carlina in several discussions, she kind of helped make this happen. And so we moved our operations there to the end of Conover Street, but a little bit just a step away. We had a beautiful pier and a garden and a meadow, and we sit there looking at the wonderful New York Harbor and all of its vistas that we have. The space itself is absolutely wonderful. It's now 107 years old. This barn-like structure that's 30 feet wide and 90 feet long houses no longer cargo, but protects people that come aboard. I especially missed all those cheering sounds of the kids that came aboard as part of our maritime education initiative. We used to do about 40 or 50 groups. As you can see, some groups were up to our capacity of 149 people. We had music, had a music series, dance, theater, nice group. Brave New World Repertory Theater has done quite a few things there. Arthur Miller and Bud Schulberg, and just really great waterfront works. But my background is on the cruises, and my background in circus brought people who would turn themselves upside down for making a good show and making people laugh. We did exhibitions so that people saw some artwork and different things when they came to see the shows. Clowns that were part of Happenstance Theater here come all the way from Washington, D.C. Many of the exhibitions just help us showcase the wonderful location that we are there in at the point there in Red Hook. Now, when the global pandemic came, of course, first we had to unfortunately cancel about 12 school groups, and we are just getting to the busy part of our season. So that also, we weren't able to do anywhere near the bookings that we usually do. A full season of about 20 shows and 3 exhibitions were scrapped. We established an austerity budget where we just cut out just about everything we could, including the excess public insurance liability that saved us about $1,000 a month, and cut our payroll back as far as we could, and applied for funds that became available. Now, little did I know that my friends, when they closed all the piers, that would be the Feathered Friends. With all the activity of humans leaving, it was these people who kept me company, gave me inspiration. They even wanted to come inside the barge. They were coming right up to the gate. They felt very much at home until one day, they finally took to water after about 3 months and took off, and we only saw them sporadically. The new focus that I had during COVID while it was shut down was to keep those beautiful spaces ready for when the public would come back. It gave us a chance to really delve into our archives and our collection and try to digitize those so we can share them with others and on the website. And of course, you know, having a big old barge, I had plenty of work to do. And usually during the summer months, I'm so busy, I don't get to do as much as I like. For 15 years, I wanted to paint those pipes that had gone in the river in creating our new dock. And so we were able to do the needle gunning and desaltification and the coating with a cold tar that was able to keep these, the dock itself in good shape. The Coast Guard had us put an electric outlet that had the cover that was in use, covered, so we could run our deck lights that keep us lit up at night. But we did finally open up to the public, and sure enough, people did come back. They came down in droves to enjoy the views, the vistas. Indeed, people love the open spaces. People would come down at all hours during from dusk to dawn, walk in the park, have their picnic, enjoy the flowers that we had spent time cultivating, having a time to read. Outdoor spaces really have become a very important spot, and we didn't really program. We wanted to have this a quiet place where people could reflect and gather and enjoy the outdoors. At sunset, of course, that's when Red Hook comes alive, and the sunsets are absolutely amazing. During this time, Turnstile Tours, I got to tip my hat to you. You guys did a great job. We've done several different walking tours, a bike tour with the Duguanas Dredgers. We're starting a oral history project with Brad Vogel and the New York Preservation Archive. The Apollonia came down to New York City, and we helped put them in touch with some Red Hook partners. We've worked on a solar project to help put on the rooftop, working with the New York City Water Ferry to bring second graders in to the barge from the ferry to bring New York City school kids to Red Hook, and also to offer some of the kids in Red Hook ferry rides as well. And also we've decided that this wonderful place that we have is a perfect spot for a webcam. So we've been partnering with an outfit that does rail fan videos and wants to get into the ship cam videos. And we're going to be putting a ship cam onto the barge. Of course, there was always these friends that came around that it was nice to have a little bit of extra time to really study who was coming to visit me, whether it be a egret, as you saw, or a blue heron that as you go outside to see the tug coming in, oh, there's a great big old great heron. Oh, sorry. We got to get quite close to that heron. He'd stayed for almost an hour, and usually I'd be running around pretty busy, but this day I just stood and just was able to enjoy him. And he seemed to know I was there, but it didn't really seem to matter. Time did kind of stop a bit with COVID. That might have been one of the silver linings that we had. I had an intern who couldn't go back to college in Wisconsin and decided to come down and was looking for a project. So we painted the boat. We found some of the replacements where rot seems to come and filled those and primed them and painted them. Of course, there's always those people who come down that just catch your eye and make your day. He said, I hate to eat and run, but I'm out of here. Of course, then we had a visit from Hurricane Isaias. Whitecaps. My friends. Stalwart. That storm gave us quite a lot of mulch for the garden from Greenwood Cemetery. One day I went outside and started poking around in a little rot that was around the bit that holds the lines going to the barge. Well, as often happens, that little bit of rot, I scratched a little bit more and it didn't stop. I kept going and going, and pretty soon I was moving the big old bit that was holding the lines and had to hope that a hurricane didn't come, because I was going to replace the deck that was under the barge. That was quite a big project. Here you can see about what that amounted to. It's one long plank there on the end, a couple of little short pieces under the bit, and about 20 feet down the other end of the barge. But I had time. I didn't have to clean up because the public wasn't coming aboard. Here's our finished project with a little bit of roof slope and the Durex mat that's so wonderful. And here's the finished product with the bit back on. Luckily, we didn't have any hurricanes that we needed the bit for. And besides people coming around, it was great seeing that Whitehall gig come with the crew. They came quite a distance. Love seeing the kayakers and the canoers and the Clearwater and all of them coming back. Here I had a school visit, but it wasn't from a bunch of students from an elementary school. It was a school of fish, bunkers, October, huge schools of fish. These were the ones that 2 months later, we would find that the Manhattan, some of them didn't leave the New York area, and we found dozens of them floating sideways in the harbor, lack of oxygen. They didn't go south quick enough. That's pretty much what I had to share with you today. But looking on the other side, I really want to thank our staff, especially Stefan. Thanks to you, all the work that you've done, our great board of trustees and our museum members. It really, I look forward to the time where we can get people back on the barge and really kind of share that which we love in common. I think going forward, I will definitely keep documenting the waterfront life. I hadn't done so much in photos or videos, but I do find that enjoyable, and want to continue to work and digitize our collection so we can share them with other museums and on the web and just make them more accessible. On our website, the homepage, you can see that tour that Andrew and Stefan did. It's a virtual barge tour. And lastly, our big ask at the moment is we're hoping to find a local company that's upgrading their fleet. My van is about 26 years old that Steve Little Key Lime Pie donated to us, and we're hoping to find a company that might be able to donate a van to us that we can upgrade in that way. So having said all of that, that's pretty much what I have. I'll go back and stop sharing my screen and hand it back to you, Richard. Thank you and all of your staff for your great work.
Well, thank you very much, David. One of the things when I was in my 20s and studying in upstate New York, we lived on a farm. Not that it was our farm. It's just that the farmer whose farm it was had built few apartments on his land, and we lived there. And the one thing that always impressed me, someone who grew up in Bushwick section of Brooklyn and barely saw a tree, not alone farm, was how self-sustaining the farmer was. That is, he was able to plant crops, he was able to fix his tractor, he was able to fix the house, he built the actual apartment house that we were living in. And I just always amazed and was so impressed by that kind of ability. And when, as you were speaking about, okay, I didn't have time to run my programs during COVID times. So what I did is I stood back and took care of this operation, took care of the barge, and all of your many skills, not only your juggling skills, which I have seen in person, but all of these other mechanical construction repair skills that you have are very impressive and all very necessary to keep all of this. And so what amazes me with all three of you, with David and Carlene and Andrew, is the talent and the skills and the abilities that all of you have to make these enterprises work and to make all of our experiences in Brooklyn that much richer. So I just want to congratulate you guys and say thanks for it all. And now, before we open it up for questions, I'll throw this to the three of you. Was there what unexpected partnerships, if any, have emerged for you from the transition from the to the virtual or COVID, the COVID world? So, like, for what relationships? Andrew told us about a few, but were there any surprising ones, unexpected partnerships that you developed? And any can work. Would any of you like to answer that?
For me, I think, meeting Andrew and having them help us make the hurdle into virtual was very helpful. That, and the other, I guess, would be probably the folks that approached us with the ship cam. I'm excited. They were looking for a place that looked into the harbor nicely. So those were.
Would you explain that? How does the ship? So in other words, they're just doing 24/7 of an ongoing.
It's monitored 24/7. So when we can take the controls and talk about what we're looking at, or when we're not there, somebody else is there and will point the camera to, whatever's interesting there in the harbor. It's a live cam. If you look up virtual rail fan, the company we're working with is called Streamtime Live. It hasn't been installed yet, but we're pretty much going to be doing that. We're looking for a sponsor who might like to be our sponsor on our website, but it'll be a camera that's open 24/7 that will be looking at the harbor, times of like when the ships came through the U.S. Comfort. We had a great view of that coming in, or the tall ship parade. We have a wonderful vista of the harbor, and it's going to kind of use that asset.
Mm-hmm. Okay. One of our BWRC one time had a presentation, a breakfast talk by a friend of ours who spent 24 hours photographing ships that came in and out, and then explained all the various kinds of maritime vessels that went back and forth, everything from barges to container ships to little tugboats and the like. But sounds interesting.
Yes.
Carlina or Andrew, or?
Yeah, I can mention, a lot of the partnerships are organizations that we, had some knowledge of or connection to, and this just created an opportunity to kind of deepen that partnership. Some of the surprising ones, we've done about 200 programs, and we've had like 110 or 120 different guests on. So we have brainstorming sessions every week with our staff to come up with ideas. One interesting one was one of our guides is a friend who is a preeminent Marx Brothers scholar. And so he did a whole program about the history of the Marx Brothers and a off-Broadway show he did about the Marx Brothers. And that was like one of our most popular programs, and it was really fantastic. On the maritime side, it's been great to work with the Navy League New York Council And I was just a member of the Navy League. We hadn't done any programming with them, but they just reached out to us and asked us if we wanted to, help them produce some virtual programs. And it's been really great working with them, and through them been able to connect with other people, both on the uniform side as well as the civilian mariner side as well. So.
Okay. Carlene, I think your audio is off.
Oh.
Your
Carlene,
audio is off.
You're muted.
Okay. Wait, good.
Okay. So in my case, there was also a personal thing when I had COVID. I had to have food delivered, and so it was really very moving. Redux, I had it so early on. Redux mutual aid food pantry thing was just ramping up, but there were all sorts of people who didn't even know me who helped. It was really quite moving. I would say the surprising thing was with the sunsets, because I started the sunset live stream to help other people. I did find that it helped me personally, just centering myself up there, zenning and everything else, and learning how to talk slower. But a lot of those people became supporters. It did also lead to a different other kind of relationship. For a while there, I was receiving quite a lot of phone calls from people who wanted to talk about the difficulties in their life. In other words, why the sunset meant so much. I felt a little bit like a therapist, and I felt that I was maybe doing a bedtime story for adults, and that these people were calling me, and they were the people who were the most shut in because they had a spouse with really big health needs, or they were elderly themselves. And so I got a lot of stories. But these people were really helpful. Like I said, our largest donor to get the engine campaign is someone we've never met, and it's through Facebook, and he's in Virginia. He doesn't want his name released, but I mean, and he's become a real friend. So I found that social media, I was always kind of skeptical about this thing, like, oh, it's called social media, we're all being social. It actually did work, at least for us.
For those who have never seen any of the shots or don't know exactly, could you tell us about, and maybe Ariel could bring something on screen to look at some of your sunset shots, but tell us about the sunset.
What I was doing,
sunset shots.
Right, I was live streaming, so they weren't photos. So I was going into Facebook Live mode, and I would just get up on top of the wheelhouse. And with a view of the harbor and Atlantic Basin here and whatever. And really in the beginning, I didn't know, should I talk, should I not talk? Am I being basically just a human holding a harbor cam, as David is talking about getting, or should I talk? I began to talk more and more. I decided not to talk all the time, and found that people actually wanted to talk. And so I turned it a bit educational, talking about the waterfowl, the birds, the ferries, how the NYC ferries are named, what's happening with the ships on the dock when the container ships come in, things like that. So it was a 20 to 30 minute thing. I made some references to contemporary affairs. I will confess, I watched George Floyd's funeral, and I couldn't speak that night. I didn't speak at all. And I said that was a tribute to him. I could also frankly see the police helicopters hovering over the city. It was very clear to me where massive demonstrations were, because I could see all those helicopter locations. I tried to avoid showing that for people to stress them out. So that was the live stream. And the other thing, honestly, was the people in the power plant in Kennett, Missouri. Initially, my plan had been to go with the crew to take the engine apart into pieces and bring it here into pieces. And because of the pandemic, that was one of the things that couldn't happen. Those people out there, I feel like I have a bunch of brothers. I mean, they were so accommodating. Like this woman calls from Brooklyn, like, hi, like the truck won't work, and then this won't work, and then that won't work. And they were so accommodating. And it's really like, I liken it to an organ transplant. They said to me, we really didn't want the old engines destroyed. They kept them as a museum. They were just emergency backup engines at that point. They had school groups and scout groups come in to see them. And they said, we've taken the plaque off the engine that you're getting, and we'd like you to send a photo of your ship so we can make a plaque for our city. I mean, I could cry now. I mean, it was really, and they accommodated. I mean, it cost them all sorts of aggravation and complication. The same thing with the guy with the crane who removed it, the trucker. These were people who didn't know us at all, who wanted to save a part of their heritage. and see it live on in Brooklyn. And they want to come visit once we get the engine in the ship. Okay, folks, we need $200,000 to get on that right away.
Thank you. Okay, do we have questions here? I noticed some of the chat people, some of the interesting things that are coming up in our chat as we're going along. And someone's talking about the great fact of people want to travel, and Turnstile Tours gives them an opportunity to do that, even if they're outside of New York. And then that program that I mentioned that I had with community college teachers from around the country, actually there's someone on right now, Kate Noonan. Hello, how are you? She was on this, and that meant that she saw David and she saw Carlina when we had that program back in 2012 or 2010. We had two of them. So good to stay on. So are there any, I don't know if we have questions coming in, but another thing is we know that we're about to have a new waterfront plan that's coming soon. We know that also coming, let's hope not too soon, is sea level rise from the climate change that's occurring. Do you see your particular areas being affected? So how might the Atlantic Basin be affected by this? How might down where you are? Well, David, I don't know if you probably have a certain amount of protection down where you are. And Andrew, what would happen to the Navy Yard? So just
Talking, Richard, you're asking about sea level rise?
Yeah. And
first off, I want to say something about that. When you said there's a new comprehensive waterfront plan coming, since I don't know who's signed on here. I don't know. Everyone seems pretty informed, like waterfront geeks are the ones I've seen commenting. But for those who don't know, the city was doing all this change to the waterfront without these comprehensive waterfront plans until the first one, which was Vision 2020. And they committed to do it every 10 years. So this is the year, or last year, 2020, was to make the next one that would be good for 10 years. I will say, I don't think the pandemic helped that process. I think though virtual programming can facilitate connecting people, their whole system for inviting and announcing, getting information back, people were really fraught and distracted. I personally think it would have been better if the Department of City Planning had postponed that a year. I don't know where it went. I will say that one thing I'm very frustrated with, and I don't think it should be an immovable object. I respect Michael Morella, who's the head of Waterfront and Open Space at Department of City Planning. I respect him a lot. But I asked him during that process last year, I said, listen, can we get somehow so that it's mandated that there be maritime uses of property the way it became mandated when there's a zoning change, that the property owners have to provide access to the waterfront. And I was one of those people, along with Pam Hepburn and a small handful of others, who actually fought the Waterfront Alliance, fought that the term should not be access to the waterfront, because that wasn't use of the water. That was just getting there to look at it. We couldn't persuade them. So what we have got as a city is the ability to go look at the water, but not use it. So what's happening is, and one of the reasons PortSide's having a hard time finding a home, and maritime businesses are, and why we don't have e-commerce, waterborne freight, and a lot of other things like that, is there is no mandate to use the water. Michael Morella tells me it's not possible to do. I don't know why that isn't possible. If you can mandate when there's a zoning change or anything else that you have to provide an esplanade and access, why can't you mandate it also has to be used? And if we don't change that, we are not getting to a maritime city. So these waterfront parks, I'm going to be blunt, they are condo lawns. Most of them do not have maritime uses of their water space. If they do, it's the last thing they put in. If they do it, they make it really fraught and complicated for the operator. I am going to elevate that now, because most people don't want to say it, because then they'll have a hard time with their landlord. The Hudson River Park makes it impossible for visiting vessels, for the ones that are there. Brooklyn Bridge Park, the same thing. Here we battle the EDC and the Port Authority to some extent. the Port Authority to some extent, mainly the EDC, you know, this is just not tenable. Red Hook has a pile of e-commerce warehouses coming, multiple ones on the waterfront, and there is no mandate for them to move anything by water. So we need a different process in this city.
I
Okay,
agree with you, Carolina, and I think it'd be wonderful if there were incentives for, say, private developers or even somebody that had a company. I know certainly insurance, the issues that you and I are having, Carolina, waterfront owners that invite the public aboard take a great risk. And if, you know, if there could be some way where, you know, just like an incentive can be done to historic preservation for you to save your beautiful old structure, there should be some help, you know, whether it's by the government or something that would help these people be willing and incentivize themselves to, you know, want to make the waterfront accessible.
I'm going to ask, we're having some questions in the Q&A and even through chat. So I'm going to ask my colleagues, Celia and/or Ariel, maybe they've been reading and gathering these, if they would mind coming on and just asking some of these questions.
And if I could add something on the
Sure.
previous question, Richard.
Sure.
Yeah, one of the last things I did in public with other human beings before COVID was to attend one of the Waterfront Alliance's kind of visioning sessions about the comprehensive waterfront plan. That was back in January of last year. Yeah, and you know, speaking about waterfront industrial sites, when we think about sea level rise, you know, industrial uses of the waterfront are some of the most resilient. So, you know, if a shipyard gets flooded, it's actually okay. It's like large open area. And so, you know, maintaining some of those uses in places like the Brooklyn Navy Yard is actually, it's important not only to support the industry, the maritime uses of the harbor, but it's actually pretty resilient use for that property in general. So that was one of the things that I recall we talked about at that planning session last year. But yeah, I mean, the Navy Yard being an industrial site, it's something that we think about all the time, trying to, you know, many of the buildings in the yard were redesigned in the wake of Sandy, you know, moving tenants to higher floors, you know, hardening spaces to protect valuable equipment. Yeah, so I mean, the Navy Yard used to be basically entirely in the water. Almost the entire Navy Yard is landfill. So it's definitely an ongoing concern.
Okay, so here's one of the questions. Politically, who has jurisdiction over the reimagining of the Brooklyn waterfront from the Navy Yard to Coney Island? Federal, state, and city need to come together to create new uses for the spaces that takes into account all of the advantages of the vast waterfront. And then I guess somewhat connected to that, Menchaca was mentioned. Have any other elected officials been helpful in these various efforts?
I want to take this one because I've been living this, I think, more than the other two panelists. And I've been living it not only as an advocate for change, but in PortSide's struggle to get a home. Now, of course, I have to say the person who asked the first question knows the answer, but he's not a panelist. You should get him on a panel. Okay. The situation is there is a great overlapping bunch of jurisdictions. So, you know, the Navy Yard is city owned, but it's, you know, run by the Brooklyn Navy Yard Development Corporation. Then you have then you've got Brooklyn Bridge Park, which is, and one of the things I want to say for the people who are listening, who are not waterfront experts, most of these large new waterfront parks are not run by the Parks Department. So we tend to all use the word park, you know, as if they're sort of all the same. But jurisdictionally, they're actually not in the city. And that becomes important, particularly if you're a boat. Because if you're trying to do mobile programming, whether you're a local boat that wants to move around or one that comes from out of town, for example, you can't just call one Parks Department. There's the Brooklyn Bridge Park is one group, Governor's Island is another group, Hudson River Park is another group, and then there actually is the Parks Department park, and then there are a couple state parks, you know, stuck in there. So you've got a waterfront that doesn't have a uniform management. Frankly, all these entities don't necessarily get along. So as you come down the shore, you have the Brooklyn Bridge Park, then you run into Port Authority property. They run part of their marine terminal to the north. Then there's the Red Hook Container Terminal run by Red Hook Container Terminal LLC. Then you get to the southern portion of it, which the Port Authority rented into the EDC again. And the EDC and the Port Authority, I will disclose, big family secret like dirty laundry, really often don't get along. So it's two enormous bureaucracies. And, and then you go down and you have a bunch of private property. There's a lot of EDC controlled property on the Sunset Park waterfront. So swing back to the politicians. By the way, also, if you're going to do anything on the waterfront, you need not only city permission for some kind of things, you need state permission, the state DEC, Department of Environmental Conservation. As much as I consider myself a green person, I feel the pendulum swung too far and they wanted New York City even before Sandy, going back to a natural shoreline. It would not permit the repair of pier infrastructure was declining. And as PortSide, I testified on behalf of PortSide in 2005. I said, we've all heard of EJ, environmental justice. There's an EJ, economic justice or injustice. In neighborhoods like Red Hook, if the neighborhood has hit the skids and could not afford to repair its marine infrastructure, why should it be penalized and not be allowed to build that back as opposed to wealthier neighborhoods? And that was what they were saying, is once it was 50% gone, you can't get it back. Now you have to pay 40% of the cost of your project, invest that into a pool of funds that they use to do environmental restoration somewhere, which is a way of saying yes, but pricing most people out of it. In terms of elected officials, when it comes honestly to the EDC, and I really want everyone here, if you're not familiar with them, to go find out about them, though it's kind of hard. You can call here. There's been very little reporting about them. They are an immovable object. They are an independent nonprofit, which does business for the city. They end up with contracts to run either city-owned property or, in this location, Port Authority-owned property. Keep those revenues. They're supposed to pay some into the city, and they get money, let's say federal money, that comes to the city through the Department of Small Business Services. So they are very large. They have a huge portfolio, but they don't tend to listen. So, for example, they promised PortSide a home for 3 years publicly. We're a give back. We are a community give back for a lease the community did not like. And then the EDC could just say no, and there were no repercussions for this. And packs of elected officials, and I mean packs, even outside our district, fought for PortSide to get a home, and all we got was a space for the ship. I mean, we're trying to get 7,000 square feet of space out of them. Honestly, we need 12,000, but they have a portfolio of 64 million square feet of space, and we can't get 10.
Okay. All right.
A lot of the commercial operators, I think it would be great. And twice we've docked at salt companies.
Yes.
Where a company might have a waterfront operation. And we're now talking with an outfit over in Staten Island that has the salt company over there. Every couple of years before COVID, they would like to do a festival. And the idea of having a company that is, a commercial company, be willing to share with the public on a short span can make all the difference, in the world, and opening up some of these places. I know the barge before Brooklyn Bridge Park, we went to the end of Atlantic Antic in 1998, the end of Atlantic Avenue, with the help of the Port Authority. And for the first time in 20 some years, the Atlantic Antic had access to the very body of water that the street was named after, but it had been the entire history, it had never been opened up. So if there's one way that we can make them more comfortable, whether it be an agency or a private company, that goodwill, whatever it could be done to encourage sharing of this wonderful asset.
David, you're such a nice guy, but I'm going to tell you, goodwill, sharing, I'm at this point, it's there needs to be a revolution, a fight for change. Because you found a home on private property. It was not PortSide's choice to be on public property. I would much rather be on private property. But again, because there's maritime use is not required, we have not found a private property home. So we're dealing with the public sector. So I know how perverse it is. So for example, PortSide was appointed by Carlos Menchaca to the Sunset Park Task Force. We were the only Red Hook element in it, which advised on the shaping of all these alphabets now, alphabets. So the RFP, the request for proposals for the South Brooklyn Marine Terminal, SBMT. And so we were there, but one of the ideas was that the EDC would have to take community input and ensure at the lease results, how they leased out the South Brooklyn Marine Terminal and Sunset Park would benefit the community. Well, what does the EDC put into as a term in that RFP? No historic ships and no ferries. Why in a maritime facility would you ever block a maritime use? What if it behooves them to have a passenger ferry bringing staffers from somewhere, or a mix of, let's say, parts and personnel, or just like the Atlantic Salt Company in Staten Island, when their dock is slow, they have made it available for maritime programming, including the country's flagship, the Bark Eagle from the Coast Guard. Why would the EDC prohibit a historic ship at the South Brooklyn Marine Terminal? That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. And David, I so appreciate your deep, sincere niceness. Niceness is getting nowhere with this. This is not nice now. This is about focusing on political change. And I'm going to say this, we need this because the harbor is an economic resource, and it is an educational and cultural one as well. Recovering from this pandemic, dealing with e-commerce rising, local e-commerce, truck traffic, lots of other things. We need to activate this water space. And those of us who've been involved with the comprehensive waterfront plan and everything else, the change isn't coming. I've had to see that New York City really does not respond to a good idea receptively.
I have one further question. I'd like to close with this. We are not yet sure about whether the wind turbines will be coming to the South Brooklyn Marine Terminal. But if in fact that were to happen, how might that affect what each of you do, what each of you does? Yeah, Andrew, we haven't heard from you. Would this in any way affect, other than you'd have some great new place to look at?
Yeah, I'll just add that we have been lucky in our relationship with the New York City Economic Development Corporation. We work with them both at the Brooklyn Army Terminal as well as at the public markets, and it's a vast organization, and we've been very lucky to be able to find people who have been there for a long time. I think institutional memory is one of the big challenges that a lot of city agencies face, and especially at the EDC. So I'll count ourselves as very lucky to have some great partnerships there. I'll also add that my wife serves on Community Board 7, so which represents Sunset Park. And so they've been talking about a lot of these issues, and especially about more accountability to the Sunset Park Task Force and things like that. But I'll leave my comments about that. But yeah, I mean, it would be interesting. I mean, that property has sat there kind of not being used, and we've advocated for a long time for more maritime and industrial use of that property, and not let it be swallowed up by other incompatible uses, because, once industrial property is gone, wherever it is in New York City, it's never coming back. There, once you either use it or you lose it, and so that's why I think it's so important to protect and prioritize this really dwindling resource, because there are a lot of companies that want to be in New York City. We have a great workforce here. We have great infrastructure, and what's keeping them out is not even necessarily the cost, but it's just the simple availability of space. So making more space available for industrial uses, and this seems to be a good viable use for it. We spent the last several years, we would go past it on tours and stuff, and all that we saw going on there was the dismantling of the failed Staten Island Ferris wheel, which was sat there for a while, and then they were slowly cut up and sold off for scrap. So it'll be nice to see a more active use for that site, for sure.
That's the second failed EDC idea in a row there. In other words, they also were going to be doing the Axis car idea of the EDCs was going to be rail floating cars override. People in the rail industry tell me that wouldn't work. That bellied up. Then came the wheel. That bellied up. People should be looking at this situation.
Okay. And David, any last
failure?
Sorry. Thank you, Carly. David, any last comment?
I would say that, looking towards your mentioning of climate change and renewable energies, the waterfront, the water itself is such a asset and such one that our answers very well might lie there. And it is our challenge, whether it takes being mean, whether it takes finding what scratches their itch, whatever it could be. We need to come together to find a way to use this asset so that we can not only save it, but save ourselves.
Okay, thank you. Quickly, Carlina, we're at the end.
Here's one idea I've had, and this is, I don't know how possible this would be. I think one thing that would help the maritime activation of the city is if there were a council person for the waterways, because the problem is council members have a little bit of rim, but it's all split up. And I rarely find a council person who's deeply conversant in things maritime, and it's hard to get conversant. It's a very complicated ecology of diverse users. And so if there was a representative speaking for all things maritime and the waterways, that would provide an informed voice. But I don't know how you change that in the city.
Okay.
Well, we have Jerry Nadler in his weird district that covers all the piers.
That's true.
To all of our guests and to all of the people who attended, I want to thank you all for coming. And as we keep these breakfast talks alive, again, I have to apologize that we can serve you coffee or Danish at these breakfast talks, but we will once again and be able to do that. And I know that many of you were with us at the end of last year to see the new building that City Tech had. And just when we had some really nice spaces for our breakfast talks, we lost it to COVID. But we will be back and look for more programs, and look also to each of our guests for their programs and to see how they're doing. David and Andrew and Carlina, thank you so much. And to all of our attendees, thank you very much. And goodbye.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Okay, bye now.
Bye.
Bye now.